Y'all doing excellent today? Good, good. So it's really funny because I had not like seen this major story until this morning when I was looking around for what we were going to talk about. And then I noticed that you guys had posted it and Richard posted it and
Yeah.
Alicia was posting about it. And I'm like, okay, I've been like head deep into other stuff. And then this evening, as I was prepping, I really started geeking out about this post office thing. Um, so I thought, okay, wow, like 2 weeks ago we had the domain names and Coinbase and something that was very applicable to our everyday lives. And now we have this story, which I think is just as applicable and could potentially change a lot for our people. So I want to talk about this, of course, from our point of view, talking about the post office. And the fact that they put a patent on this shows how serious they are. I also have something else to show you to show how serious they are as well. Well, when I was doing my research, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I got to show people this too. And I have an interesting article where there's a dissenter. There's actually a group of dissenters saying that this is not a good idea to put our voting on the blockchain. And the person who wrote the article was like a really good objective journalist. So they brought out the quotes and the comments from people who are very much against it, as well as countries and other subgroups that are using it and their successes, their failures, and things like that. So I thought, so the two articles that I picked, one is just like an overview, and the second one is something that I feel goes into the depth of discussion. And I think you guys will like this evening. So I know it's a small group tonight, but I really would love to see your comments in the chat as well. We'll try to make it as interactive as possible here with our team. So, well, let's get started.
Yes, ma'am.
All righty then. So, welcome. You know, if it's Wednesday, it's Blockchain Day. So, welcome to Blockchain Chat. I am Cherie. I'm here with Talisha and Eric from Blockchain Consortium International. We are all about the business of blockchain here at BBC. And what does that mean? It is all about whether you want to get jobs, blockchain jobs, or blockchain-based businesses. You want to invest in the blockchain, whether you're investing time or money into a project. And ultimately, this is going to be a $3.1 trillion industry. We want our share, our piece of the pie. So whether you love smart contracts, you love tokenization, you love identification. We're going to talk tonight about voter identification and people using the blockchain in order to secure votes and some of the, concerns that people have and all of that stuff. We're here for that. And it's really funny because we've been doing Wednesday nights for what, 3 years now?
Yes.
And my mother says, hey, you can rest tonight, huh? And I'm like, no, it's blockchain day. It's blockchain night. Like, what's the problem? We've only been doing this for 3 years.
Hey, she's like, what day is it? No one knows.
So anyway, so that was my joke with my mother. She's like, okay, yeah, all right. So anyway, so Talisha, Eric, how are you guys doing?
Been an interesting day as always.
Yeah.
Never
when
slow.
You say interesting and you smile, it's just like I want to clobber somebody.
We're juggling here. We're doing the 10K, we're doing BBC, we're doing everything that we can in the middle, and so it's a very I would say the wearing of many hats, but then still with that same purview of trying to do everything with the same intent. So
absolutely. And we're looking forward one day when we can do some things where we want to tokenize some of the things within 10K project as well. So, we have our own little ideas with regards to how we can apply the blockchain. But today we are talking about applying the blockchain to the vote. So, Eric, do you have anything to say before we jump in to our conversation?
No, I'm just excited to be here, especially
Okay.
to get into this discussion. So, yeah.
Okay, so before we get started then, and if you guys, Talisha and Eric, have interactive questions to ask the community, let me know, because I want this to be super interactive. So let me know, I say yes or no, just yes or no. Do you right now think that we will use the blockchain for voting by the year 2030? Yes or no, in the next decade? Do you believe we will? The puppy just came up to greet me. He's excited. So we have yeses here. Okay. All righty then. So tell me why, Tangi and Richard, and I want to hear from Eric and Talisha as well. We got Glenn here. Hey, Glenn. Tell me why you believe in the next decade we will use a blockchain-based system for voting.
I'm going to say we already have. So
We already have,
we already
yes,
have.
and we're going to talk about what has happened thus far,
Yeah.
both positive and some people say negative.
Mhm.
Eric?
Well, I'm just going to say, because we are moving towards a even greater digitized society. Voting right now, as it is pretty much analog for the most part, and we are spiraling ahead towards a greater digitized society. So, without question, I believe that voting will toss its hat into the ring along with everything else that we're going to see.
Interesting. So Tangi is saying voting on a large scale has already happened in Russia. It's actually Estonia, and blockchain is the future. So yeah, it's very interesting. I'm the only reason why I'm not sure is because the lawmakers are of a certain age and their most populous voting bloc is of a certain age as well. And we're going to talk about the functionality of how voting on the blockchain, what happens, like how does it work? And for those of us who have ever used, not necessarily Coinbase, because I don't think, oh my God, it's been so long since I signed up for Coinbase, but when I did like Gemini and a couple of the other platforms, that was the system we had to go through where we had to show our driver's license, and you had to do other things in order to prove your identity and things like that. So that's what they're going to use. So digital identities is going to be the core of this, but it's also something that people feel is the vulnerability. And I will say ultimately, I believe that there will be people who will make millions of dollars just doing customer service for stuff like this. Right? There's going to be, and we'll have this, because again, we have a smaller group tonight, we could talk about it, some of the offshoots of companies outside of just the actual voting blockchain app companies that are going to make it. Again, we love tossing ideas out around here. So Richard is saying the United States never wants to be left behind. It's the future of blockchain.
Correct.
They never want to be first either with certain things is another thing that
But
I would
we've done
say.
this with West Virginia. So
We
we did it
have
2 years ago with military voting. So
Mhm,
and they had 100% correct validation with that.
mhm,
I think we went to the Government Blockchain Association's conference in early February,
mhm.
and it was the future of money, governance, and law. And one of the panels was a voting panel, and they spoke about it very eloquently. One person specifically, her name was Amelia Powers Gardner, and she was the Utah County Clerk Auditor. And
Yes.
she said, which was so powerful, and I remember that story so well, where she was like, adoption is all about storytelling.
Mhm.
And she was like, if you can tell a good story, you have buy-in.
You
And
can
so
get.
one of the stories she used was a resident who is the oldest resident registered voter in Utah. Her name was Maxine Grimmett. And she was 106 years old, and she broke her ankle and she couldn't go to the polls, but she had participated in every single election since she was allowed to vote. And so she was like, I can't miss this.
Mhm.
So they had a film crew, a television film crew, and bought her an iPad to let her vote online. And so she did it while everybody was watching, and that was the story. That was the hook.
Yes, see.
So the county clerk was like, yeah, she was given this project of how to basically leverage, basically, I would say, technology in the sense of using smartphones, iPads, those kind of things for disabled citizens. And she was using blockchain as the undercurrent to that. But at the same time, she was like, okay, let's see how this could work. But again, she needed a good hook.
Yes.
And Miss Maxine was the greatest hook ever in that she had all those great, qualities of being the oldest resident, that she could do it. And she was so happy. She's like, look, it's on my iPad. And she was super happy. And everybody was like, oh, this is the greatest thing. And she got her vote in. And I think that's the impetus of where we're going. And we have to make it, of course, easy. But at the same time, those undercurrents that we're going to see is that ease of use. If we can get that kind of turnout and that level of security, we're going to see it instantly kind of go from 0 to 60.
So Richard is saying story, strategy, system, a winning combination. So, and Tangi is saying that's awesome info, Talisha. So yeah, I didn't remember the person's name, but I do know that there are these stories out here. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens. We have someone in Facebook as well. I got my digital notary certificate issued today by Texas. Notarial actions are prepping for blockchain or notary actions are prepping for blockchain
awesome,
too.
Kelly.
Thanks, Kelly. Yes, thank you. Thank you for saying that. So, all righty then. Well, let me share my screen. The two articles I have are kind of long, so I'm going to break them up and get Eric and Talisha to talk about certain sections of them as well. So So this is, of course, the overview article from Forbes talking about the Postal Service and some of the attacks that they're getting. But actually, the article really just talks an overview about what's happening. So the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office today made public a patent application from the United States Postal Service titled Secure Voting System that describes using blockchain tech to secure mail-in voting. The application is reported to have been filed on February 7, 2020. It's a voting system that can use the security of blockchain and the mail to provide a reliable voting system. A registered voter receives a computer-readable code in the mail and confirms identity and confirms correct ballot information in an election. The system separates voter identification and votes to ensure vote anonymity and stores votes on a distributed ledger in the blockchain. Chief among Trump's complaints against mail-in voting are doubts about whether or not the person whose name is on the ballot actually cast the vote, and whether or not the ballot was tampered with after it was sent. In both instances, blockchain offers tantalizing possible solutions. Blockchain identity services are already being widely developed, and by moving the vote to a shared distributed ledger, the votes would transmit almost instantly, drastically reducing the ballot's vulnerability to tampering. And it would be pretty much like instant results too. They didn't really say that, but I think that would be another benefit as well. Voters generally wish to be able to vote for elected officials or on other issues in a manner that is convenient and secure. Further, those holding elections wish to be able to ensure that election results have not been tampered with and that the results are actually correspond to the votes that were cast. So I want to stop here and bring my panel on and talk about if the country doesn't believe, if people in general do not believe that their votes are secure, that their votes are anonymous, because that's actually one of the big things, like, people say anything to pollsters, right? But when they go into that voting booth, their votes thus far have been considered anonymous. So people more so tell the truth now when they're in the voting booths. And also if people don't believe the results, if enough people don't believe the results, it could cause issues with the faith in our democracy. So I want to open it up to both of you as well as the chat. You know, let's talk about that. Is that not necessarily that we believe it's not a fair concern, but how do we again mitigate that with the public at large to say you have this system and it is it's not going to cause the issues? Is it just storytelling, or is there more that needs to be done to prove that out?
You know, okay, let me just say something about this. I'm gonna make a prediction about this election right now about this,
Okay.
what I believe. And it's not about who's going to win or who's going to win or not. It is going to be about the sentiment after the election, without question. And I believe this more than any other time, and even those who remember the Bush-Gore recount. I believe that this time, you're going to have one side completely saying they were rigged, and they are not going to accept the results. I do believe that's going to happen without question. It would need to be so overwhelming. And even if that happens, I think that people are just going to be that unhappy. So, and this is what I guess I kind of say this about voting and blockchain adoption, whether it happens or not in this election. That kind of angst, that kind of contention coming out of it will be the catalyst to me that really spurs it ahead, that blockchain becomes a solution. Because at that point, it's going to be, okay, well, listen, we can't, and pundits will be there saying, oh, no. And now, and we already know, most of the time people don't go and they read, the articles of, where people are saying, no, it actually was fair, and this is what happened. People don't do that. Things happen in very sound bites and that sort of thing, and on social media, and then we have a lot of conspiracy theorists and that sort of thing and put things out. So because of that, we will need a much more sure system than what we have now. So, and I believe that will, whether it happens in this particular election or not, no question about it, the result is going to spur us to an adoption. And I believe the blockchain is the best one that we have going for us right now.
So Alicia, you want to comment?
Yeah, I would say truly this will be a watershed moment, because it's again, just as everything about this year proves that the inadequacies and just incorrectness of how we've done things in the past are coming to a forefront. And this is the moment that you're going to see that. We've had incorrect information forever. We've had the Bush-Gore recount. We've had the hanging chads. We've had the systems that changed, the vote. and there's
a lot of voter suppression.
Yeah, voter suppression. We've had, the machines not where they're supposed to be. You can't mail in your votes. Now we have so many disparate things coming together at this point that now we need a centralized place, which is the oddity here. It needs to have one singular place of truth, because we have too many things going on. And the irony of blockchain being a decentralized system, but being now the center of truth, comes to pass. And we'll have to have something that truly will give the legitimacy to it. And again, I don't think a lot of people understand, but I don't think people understand the voting system right now. So asking them to know something else, you don't know what you don't know, and I can't explain to you something new that you don't know. But at this point, if you feel secure just because that's how you've always done it, again, this year has proven that everything you've done is not going to work. So you have to do something new. So this is going to be a force. This is not going to be a nice adoption of oh, this makes me feel good. I have utter, belief and confidence. It's just, you're going to be your choice. That's it. It's really going to be, I think, mandated that you have to do this in this way.
Yeah, you actually bring up a good point, because what has happened in our country with the pandemic and everything socially as well has caused certain things that were inevitable to be sped up. And you're right about this. This is going to be one of those things where people are going to say, okay, well, this is how it is,
And we've seen
then
this before. We've seen other things where, when we got into the digital age where certain things that you did exclusively with paper, you no longer are able to do that. Like, you're mandated now to fill out this form online. There's no other way. You have to log in. We're going to see that happen here. And they said it's going to be at the disgruntlement of a whole host of people, but sometimes that's how things have to happen. There are going to be a cutoff point where you can't rely on those systems anymore. And this is one of those things where we've proven now, specifically, that no one is trusting anything right now. This is the truest point of everybody has a distrust, probably at the highest level that they've had in our history of our country and our democracy. So at this point, we have to do something very dramatic in order to gain that trust. And even if it's to put something trustless, I think that the parallel here and the paradox of going into these type of systems is just because it has the greatest benefit and it's undeniable. I think no matter how you feel about it, how you want to, kind of push the theories around, it is what it is. And if that's what's going to have to happen, that's what's going to have to happen to get past this point as well. And then maybe there will be some dialogue and some refinement, but there's going to be a strong cutoff point, I think, at some point that's going to make that a real hard left, and we're never going to come back from that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to continue on with the article here. So there's a gentleman named Matson who says here, we're talking about here about the votes of individual voters would be recorded either on the blockchain or effectively time-stamped and then recorded elsewhere. So both help to mitigate the risk of double voting or vote manipulation, as well as give the voter confidence through transparency of the process. Blockchains are no magic bullet for voting platforms, Matson says, and identifies the identity verification as the more critical component, something which he indicated the patent also acknowledges. Blockchain tech was utilized at the Utah Republican Convention, as well as in Arizona, to send delegates to the Republican National Convention after each state decided to hold their conventions remotely. Technology was used in 2018 West Virginia elections for absentee ballots for overseas military. However, a report by MIT showed potential vulnerabilities of the vendor software. So those are some of the things we're going to talk about later on. The post office is not alone in exploring the benefits of blockchain tech when it comes to voting. The United States Senate Permanent Selection Committee on Investigations issued a report earlier this year that recommended blockchain tech be used for potential votes in and by Congress. And I had forgotten about this, but one of the questions that I wanted to ask was how else was this going to be used? And as I was reading this article, I'm like, yeah, they did talk about that as well. So not only are we going to be voting our elected officials in, then they're going to be voting from home as well, or from wherever, they are. So they're not going to have to be on the floor, in order to cast their vote, which I think is very interesting. I also wonder if votes like this are going to be used for, corporations, like big corporations that have, like I am a stockholder in certain, public companies, and every once in a while I get, something to vote for the board of directors or vote, for something else within the corporation. I never do because I never know who any of the people are. But I wonder how blockchain is going to be used for these types of systems. So Talisha, Eric, what do you guys think about this?
Here's one thing that I do say about this is, things don't happen in silos. I mean, they do at points, but not when they become this dramatic. And what I believe is this is setting us up, and Talisha, I'd like to get your take on it, but I believe this is setting us up too for really having digital ID self-sovereignty.
Mhm.
And that's really the key that I'm really looking at this and going, okay, well, wait a minute now. So how are you going to identify me? So now I need to have my digital identity. Now, first of all, one thing too that I have to say, which the populace really needs to be educated on, is that should never be something that is, really controlled by any central authority. That should be your own. Um, you should have complete ownership over that. But to me, that would work in a stack in accordance with this. But I believe that, to me, you can't. I don't know if it works without that. I mean, Lisa, what do you think?
I think there's strong components that need to be in place. Like I said, again, these are technologies, plural, that need to work in congruency with one
Mm-hmm.
another. And I think it's just like I said, you have to register to vote right now. You have to physically do that and get that. You're still tracked, and that is the aspect of sovereignty. You still have to show and prove who you are, where you are. All those things are still going to have to be in place. But now, again, each system component now has to work with the other, and all of these pieces come together. And I think Kelly even said, it's like she said, people won't believe in it until they have some stake.
Mhm.
I don't think that's true, in the sense that the internet came and there were a whole lot of things that were digitized without anybody's co-signing. It was just like, today this is what we're going to do, and you're going to either follow suit or you're not going to participate. And that becomes the issue. I think the rub is that people won't understand. There's already people who don't vote now just because they just feel like they don't matter. And now just giving them another reason, like, well, I don't understand how to do it. That becomes the next hurdle. So I think that's where the strong rub is. But in effect, it can happen. It's not like I said, we don't need people to co-sign. It's not like you're going to sign up and say, okay, we need you to vote to see how to vote. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen. It's the technology that's going to be utilized. Either you participate or you don't, and that's going to be the push forward.
But I
So
like.
go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, well, like I have a question, because I was talking to my sons about it last night. We were eating dinner, and I was bringing this whole thing up, and I was like, well, you know what? But then I caught myself after I said, like, wait, that could be a bad idea. But we already see on our iPhones and that sort of thing where the user, you can have your fingerprint to unlock it, and then we see the technologies like Clear, which you can use it with the user retina scan and allows you to pass through the airport. So I'm like, okay, but no, it's like, well, wait a minute though. If any central authority has complete control over that, that very much could be totally used against someone. But I say that because it's going to be very, very important. How does someone prove they are who they say they are when they go in to vote to do this?
Right now, how do they do it? As in, like, let's take a look at what
Okay.
is in place now, so we can do a full compare and contrast. All you required are, again, your identification of whatever, and sometimes you need multiple forms
Mm-hmm.
that's issued by somebody. So you need a driver's license, you need a passport. We even need cards here. Like, for, when I go to Virginia, they make sure I'm in the right polling station, because I'm not allowed to go somewhere else. And you're on the list, which
Mm-hmm.
again is so ridiculous that you have to be on a list. I'm like, if I live here, I show you I live here, I got a driver's license. What does it matter where? But it matters to them. So all of those things, I said, these antiquated things that we already are doing, how is that even better? How does that even help you? In the sense, if I had biometric information, because all that information again is the same. What if it just validates me? It doesn't need a physical person to sit there and look at my ID and then look at the list and say, yes, Talisha, you're able to vote here. If I
Mm-hmm.
go to the scanner, the biometric, if it's my finger, if it's my eye, something that gives me that information, AI scans my whole face and says, yes, you are valid. This is where you're supposed to be. There will be less of human intervention. Like, to me, that intervention of having polling people there to say yes or no, or you have to be turned away, that can all be, again, that suppression would actually instantly go away. Because if I go up and it tells me, yes, I can vote, I can vote. It doesn't need to
Mm-hmm.
have all this, let me double check, are you a felon, are you not, are you this,
Mm-hmm.
are you registered? All of that would be eliminated. So sometimes I think it's like the pros and cons, we're going to have to weigh. Yes, there's going to be some rub, but at the same time, what value do we gain? What trust do we get out of this? And that may be the issue of, you're going to have to give a little to get a lot more. And that's where we are now. I think we do these things without conscientiously thinking about them, that there's data already being captured about us each and every time. What would be the difference from it being a digital capture rather than this physical person-to-person capture?
So I actually do see where people can get messed up. So according to the article, it's your biometric plus a QR code that you get in the mail, which is why the post office is a part of this process. Well, what happens if I don't get that QR code in the mail?
I said, we can't rely on physicality, because that's the whole point. Like, you need an address. Like, think of all the homeless people who are registered to vote but can't vote because they don't have an address.
Well, there are a lot. So I happen to know that if you're homeless, you can't get any kind of aid. Like, for
Correct.
example, I mean, that's like a huge flaw in the system. So my whole thing is that there are still ways for our people to get screwed in this whole process.
Yeah.
Based on what they have it to. The voter suppression thing is not going to be lifted up because blockchain is coming. Based on
it will. I think the barriers that are there will be lessened because of that. Because again, it's only set upon the criteria. If you put the criteria in, like I said, that these are the things that you need to be valid to vote. If it just only checks those things, then you're not maneuver. Like I said, the list sometimes gets manipulated, and that's like, oh, you're not on the list. Well, I don't need to be on any list. I need to be registered in the system to say, yes, I can vote. That's all. Those double and triple checks that are being done when you go to the polls, or you're being threatened at the polls or whatever, that part is eliminated in that sense. Like I said, the barriers can always, somebody's going to come up with something. But
and that's what I'm saying is that I think that there are other barriers that we're not talking about here. There are going to be other barriers put in place. Again, because the way that the post office has their blockchain system set up for the mail-in voting, there are going to be barriers.
Yeah, if we're using the same data in, bad data in gives you bad data out.
or again, the QR code that they're saying it's supposed to be biometric plus your QR code in the mail. Well, suppose you are, with Aunt Sally for the next 6 months because she's terminally ill, and you don't get your code, or suppose it's lost in the mail, and we put that in quotes.
Or you can't get it.
Yes. And then all of a sudden you have whole zip codes of people saying, I never got, and it's because that postal worker decided they didn't want to deliver mail that day. So all I'm saying is we shouldn't look at this as a cure-all for the community, because it's not going to be.
Yeah. Well, I said technology is never going to be the solvent. It is a tool to be used, but we have, again, other barriers that are already in place that make this untenable. The current system is untenable. And trying to just digitize the current system isn't going to work. So we're going to have to find other ways. And I think, and that's the discussion needs to be not a 1-to-1 ratio. And I think that's what we're trying. The race is to digitize the current system. That's not going to help us, anyone, truthfully. But yes, it disenfranchises us in the sense that it remains the same barriers that we had in the current system are going to exist in a digitized form, and then can be rapidly and exponentially put against us. So that's where we have to mitigate some of this. And that's why it needs a whole overhaul, truthfully, of how this actually happens and what constitutes a valid vote.
So then the question is, who's fighting for that? Because we saw last year the NAACP, I don't know if all of our participants remember that, the NAACP was greatly against blockchain being used because they were scared that Black people would not get their Social Security benefits and their system benefits. So my question would be, and I know we don't have the answer here, it's just the question, who is going in and fighting for this, who understands the technology and understands how the community can get screwed out of their votes and their voting rights? I don't know if there is an answer to that question. We can dig further, but I think that is a huge need right now is for somebody to be able to do that, because this could cause more, and then you have more people just disenfranchised and they never get back into voting. They're just like, oh, they're going to do whatever they want to do anyway, you know. And
And the
next thing you
Government
know,
Blockchain Association talked about that too, with regard to the disenfranchisement. You know, again, that panel was really interesting in that it took a look at not only the US based systems, but also other systems across the world, and even brought up things like land registry, how individuals in Brazil wanted to get their land and it was owned, you know,
by somebody,
by
yeah.
poor people who didn't really understand, couldn't find their titles, and all of a sudden they were disenfranchised out of their land because individuals made up data and said, now it's mine, and put it on blockchain, and now it's immutable. So that becomes the issue too, is that you have to have really strong protocols in order to build a system. You just, like I said, you don't take one-to-one, but at the same time, that's where you have to have advocates, and you need that diverse set of thinking in order to say, okay, well, that doesn't work because this could happen. Because people get into that myopic mindset of like, oh, let's just put all the data that we have. Well, have you validated that data? Is that even correct? It's been, you know, just sitting here. Who knows what happens to it? Is it all the data that you have, or is it just pieces? All of these things, that's why the conversation isn't about the technology. It's truly about the proliferation of the information, gathering it. How do you leverage that? And then you put it into the technology solution.
I agree.
So we talked with, we're going to have Brent come back, Brent Gray, who is our blockchain government person around here. And I think that there are some government contracts, some GovCon opportunities just for this, kind of going through the process of, you know, various minorities and indigenous people and things like that, and groups like that, and how their rights can be protected as well, whether it's consulting or whether it is marketing, communication, et cetera, et cetera. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities within blockchain and voting. I'm going to read this final article here because I think this is a good one as well. It's from Computer World, and it's titled, Why Blockchain-Based Voting Could Threaten Democracy. So it's a really good article. It kind of gives both sides here. So we talked about over the past couple of years, West Virginia, Denver, and Utah County, Utah have all used blockchain-based mobile apps to allow military members and their families living overseas the right to cast absentee ballots using an iPhone. Not only does blockchain make it secure, but the blockchain-based mobile app has a really unique biometric safeguard system in place, as well as facial recognition and thumbprints, according to Queen, who said this after the 2018 general election. And Queen is, Mike Queen, Deputy Chief of Staff for West Virginia Secretary of State. So he's a pretty high up person who is certifying this. So if I were running for office and they decided to use the blockchain for the election, I would be scared. So this is the counter argument, says a guy named Jeremy Epstein, Vice Chairman of the Association for Computing Machinery's U.S. Technology Policy Committee. Epstein co-authored an election security report with Common Cause, the National Election Defense Council, and the R Street Institute, called Email and Internet Voting, the Overlooked Threat to Election Security. In it, he criticized blockchain and internet voting as a ready target for online attacks by foreign intelligence, and said transmission of ballots over the internet, including email, fax, and blockchain systems, are seriously vulnerable. There are many reasons blockchain is not good for voting, Epstein said. For one, it assumes that there is no malware on the voter's computer. It also assumes you want all the votes to be perennially public, because if someone finds a way to hack into the blockchain, everyone's vote becomes public. And while blockchain networks may be able to handle small absentee voter populations, the technology could not stand up to use by the general voter populace and its volume. So I want to stop right there and let's kind of pick this argument apart. Talisha, Eric, who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Eric.
Wait a minute, that sentence. Well, no, I mean, I was going to say for that last sentence, like, why does he feel that way? Why does he feel that the technology couldn't stand up to the use by the general public populace in its volumes? Is he?
And this is not an article from 2016. When I first read this, I had to go back and look at the date. This is an article from a couple of days ago. I mean, if it were 2016, I might have said, yeah, I could understand, he's right, blah, blah, blah. But with everything that has evolved with some of the other blockchain protocols, I'm just like, why do you think it couldn't handle the volume?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm scratching my head at that. I don't know. I don't know what his take was on that. But that one, let me just say that would be something that would probably scare a lot of governors. If you were to tell them this, of like, oh my gosh, if everybody goes and votes one time, it's going to crash the system, and they're not going to be able to. We won't be able to, maintain it or that sort of thing. And they will say, oh my gosh, we're not going to do it. But that was one for me that don't really understand. As far as, I don't know. I mean, this guy, I'm sure does, of course he's accomplished. He's but does he really understand blockchain? It seems like. I'm sorry, Talisha. Let me mute myself.
You also have to understand that anytime you're advocating for change, there's somebody who is going to say no. So I think one of the big things, and Richard talked about, is storage strategy system. You have to be able, as a blockchain consultant, to answer these concerns that lawmakers who are making the final decisions are going to have. If you're not able to articulate why Epstein is incorrect in a way that's persuasive, then that's going to be an issue for anything you're trying to drive forward. Talisha, you wanted to comment?
I think the first issue, again, this is the articulation of where the fallacies come in, equating email, fax, and blockchain is beyond. That's like saying driving in horse buggy. Who owns the fax? That's what I would love to know, because that would be analog. That goes through a telephone line. As I say, when you break things down, I think that's why it's easy to persuade or dissuade people with regard to things when they don't know. So it's like, okay, if I said fax, well, that takes the phone. Do I call in my vote right now? No. Email. Okay, well, don't you scan every single ballot that comes in? That's how you get it, and it goes to a computer system. So what's the difference now? If we take all the votes right now and scan them, that's how everywhere in the country it is done at this point in time. It goes through a computer system. So if you're saying that we couldn't handle the volume, how do we handle the volume currently? If you're saying, yep, well, if I need to make it public, well, that's the same thing as going to the polling station and having somebody stand behind you and say, yep, I saw what you did. I saw that you cast your vote. Again, you're registered to vote there. It'll tell you how many people voted there. It could make that same argument if I can pick you out if I reverse engineer the location, the time, and the date. I could get that information now without having a blockchain system. So when these things come up, this is where you have to go toe to toe with these, I would say, outrageous, oh, it's the death, it's the horrible story. It's like, okay, let's take it down. Let's break it down into its singular spits of things. And this is not correct. All of these things are happening currently. So how are we dealing with those information glitches now? And that's what I would like. That would be my argument. Explain to me how this happens now and what are the safeguards and benchmarks that we use in order to derail those systems currently, because the blockchain isn't here. So we can't talk about it. Tell me how today it works effectively.
Right.
And this all kind of crumbles very quickly.
Sheree, do you mind reading that next paragraph?
Oh, sure. This until there is a major.
Yeah.
Here, until there is a major technological breakthrough in or fundamental change to the nature of the internet, the best method for securing elections is a tried and true one: mailed paper ballots, according to Epstein.
Okay.
I rest my case.
I'm just saying, let's go. Let's whatever your argument. I always say, don't argue with a fool because you won't know who is who. So just go. Okay. Is that what we do now? We do it by paper. Okay.
Well, mailed paper ballots too.
Mail.
Yeah.
I mean, only a certain percentage of people that are doing absentee do that. So, okay. So, in a research paper written by computer scientists from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and the University of South Carolina, along with election oversight groups, Internet voting startup VOATS was called out for not releasing any detailed technical description of its technology. VOATS's blockchain-based voting service was the one used in West Virginia, Denver, and Utah County to enable military absentee voting. Most of the details of the architecture and procedure are apparently confidential, though it is not clear why, the research paper said. The system has not gone through federal certification or any public certification to our knowledge. The company, the company has not disclosed its source code nor allowed its system to be examined open by third parties. VOATS has contracted with Palo Alto-based authentication company Jumio to perform remote voter authentication. The authentication procedure requires a voter use the VOATS iPhone app to send to Jumio a photo of the driver's license or passport photo page along with a short live selfie video of their face. So I think video is interesting versus just a picture. So they're trying to do things to stop the manipulation of it. Jumio uses machine learning facial comparison software to determine whether the face on the ID matches the one on the video. If it does, the voter is authenticated. Y'all are gonna think I'm mean, but the first thing I thought after I read this was, what if somebody had a nose job or some extensive facials?
Or deep fake.
So like they had their Botox that day.
That could happen.
The researchers questioned the efficacy of using a tiny driver's license or passport photo for authentication purposes and noted those photos can be up to 10 years old. And this is, I highlighted this in yellow to really point this out. Among other problems, they also noted facial comparison systems have been discovered to have high error rates, especially for minorities. This seems to be pervasive.
Yes.
Pervasive and this goes back to the number one question I had as I was researching and reading all of this is, how can our people get screwed? If our people are not going to be recognized because we're too dark, you know, our noses are too wide, they think we're a gorilla. Look it up look up artificial intelligence and Black people and, you know, people these apps identifying us as gorillas. This would be a major problem. So I want to open it up to my panel.
Where the interplay of all the technologies have to be in place. It's not just slap a blockchain on it and away we go. There are very strong contingencies with regard to making every piece of the data valid and able to be utilized effectively. So that's why I said it's not just a one-stop shop kind of thing, like, oh, let's just digitize voting. We can't do it that way. There are many things that need to be considered and that have to be tried and true and tested. That's why I think we need to have the conversation from a 360, not just a 1-to-1 ratio of, okay, well, we need this to do that. We can't have that conversation because it's no longer that. There are so many variables that now come into play that need to actually preclude these things before we even get to the final solution.
Mm-hmm. Eric, you have anything you want to add to that? You're on mute as well. You're on mute, Eric.
Oh, no, sorry. I was going to say, like Lisa's right, it's something we've talked about. I mean, blockchain is immutable, but bad data on the blockchain is not immutable bad data. So, you know, you just went from one problem to probably even a greater problem. So yes, those working out that piece, and this is the things you just brought up, Sheree, of all of those issues that we have had with facial recognition software,
Mhm.
that needs to be fixed. That, like,
Yes.
before we even could enter into start using this.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will say that this section of the article, like this is a logical, um, uh, I keep thinking clapback, but that's not what I want to say.
Yes,
A
this is a
logical,
rebuttal. This is
a
a great
logical
rebuttal.
rebuttal. This is a logical rebuttal versus the first one we read. This one, I'm like, yeah, you kind of have a point there.
This has validity, and this would definitely be something of a consideration. So yes, we will
Yes.
have to do these things in order for it to be correct and valid.
Yeah.
100%. Comparing it to a fax, not so much.
The other thing that I did like about this section here was the fact that it's a simple iPhone app that people are able to download in order to do this. So in this scenario, it doesn't need the post office.
Correct.
Really. So we just talked about the post office and how they would do it. This is another application which does not require the post office, because so all the things that I just said about what happens if I don't get my QR code in the mail and all of that stuff goes away with this system. The other final thing that I thought was the I don't want to say the audacity of people to require the source code be put out there, but I guess I am curious about the whole, you know, certification, and I don't necessarily know if they need to have the entire source code out there, because maybe it does show some vulnerabilities and we don't necessarily want it out there for national security reasons. But it would be interesting to see who within the government or some other certifying agency actually has gone through the source code as well.
Well, to me, that is a quality assurance job.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to see all of the code. You need to see the functionality, and that's their job, to come up with all the test scenarios, to run, to regression test, to do all of those things necessary. Before, you don't need an open source to do that. I said, that's what I'm saying. You're leaving the job to the people who do that job. You don't need to all, because what if it's proprietary data? Well, again, and a person can say, well, I don't like how you coded that. It's not really up for discussion because it is proprietary to them.
Mm-hmm.
But the output has to be consistent. You're looking for very specific results, and any deviation within a certain purview. That's why all the business portion of it needs to be really tight. Like what's mandated to make this system compliant? That's the discussion that needs to be had. Don't worry about the source code. You need to worry about what makes this compliant each and every time under a myriad of circumstances. And that's, to me, that's where the concentration, and again, trying to throw it back and be like, oh, we need to see the code. You don't understand the code, so why would I show it to you? I could razzle and dazzle you with 2 lines of HTML. You wouldn't know the difference. You know what I mean? I hate when people are like, oh, let me see the code. You don't know what that means. Shut up.
Well, that's why I thought, I'm like, okay, I know somebody needs to see the code outside of just the internal VOATS people, but I don't necessarily know if you want to have it like just out there.
You don't need an open source. Yeah, it's not necessary.
Open source. I didn't think that
But
was
you do need to make the testing very much clear. Like, what were the percentages? What are the effectiveness? Just like when we say clinical trials, it's the same thing. You want to know the efficacy of the drug. You want to know the efficacy of this solution.
Yeah.
You want to see, is it correct 99% of the time or 76% of the time? That's what I need to know before I venture in and use this solution.
Right. Okay, so moving on. So in the 2018 election, 144 registered West Virginia voters from 21 counties cast their ballots using VOATS. So, you know, it was a small sample size. New research from the University of Chicago found that allowing military members overseas to vote using a mobile device increased turnout by 3 to 5% among those eligible to use the system in the 2018 federal election in West Virginia. Being able to cast ballots online using only smartphones or other mobile devices can dramatically reduce the cost of voting, particularly for underrepresented groups, and has significant effects on the size and composition of the voting population. One of the things I think about with this paragraph is how many people work 3 jobs and can't get to the polls. That's one of the things, again, that affects our community, affects the poor, which is a positive, but also would be one of the reasons that some people might fight it if they are trying to suppress the vote, especially from impoverished people, which our people tend to be more of, then this could be a double-edged sword right here. So a third-party audit conducted by the National Cybersecurity Center and Denver election divisions showed that votes cast over the blockchain application were recorded and tabulated accurately. The final numbers showed that the voter turnout doubled from the 2015 election, and a post-election survey from the Denver Elections Division found that 100% of respondents said that they favored secured mobile voting over all methods available to them. So if you make it easier for people to vote, anywhere from 5% additional people to doubling the turnout, depending on what it is, that's a huge swing as well. There are other companies that are getting into this game, including Secure Vote, Smartmatic, and Votum, even though Votum has closed its doors to new people. Several European countries abandoned internet voting after seeing that the increases in turnout were not as large as expected. However, Estonia, which is close to Russia, has embraced internet voting and created the world's first national online voting system. They had more than 30,000 people vote online. So of course, 30,000 people is like a small town in the United States. I'm sure the people will say that, However, their online voting population in the Balkan state reached 44.4%. And I said, oh, well, how much is it in the United States? Because y'all know I just like to ask another question here. So this is the Wikipedia page about voting turnout. And these are all the percentages here. So in 2016, voter turnout amongst eligible voters in the United States was 55% or 56%, which is higher than Estonia's. So I just, again, wanted to get kind of a feel for where we are. And I'm also, thinking about 5%, an additional 5% of people or 10% of people who end up voting. That could swing not only presidential elections, but mayoral elections, state senators, police, for example. Are you able, so somebody, let's take a Cardi B, for example, right? Cardi B could get, on her Instagram with a whole bunch of people who are able to do mobile voting the day before an election and say, hey, Sheriff such and such a person is a bad person, let's vote him out. And all of a sudden, you've got people who maybe normally wouldn't vote now going into the app. And so what I'm saying is there could be a huge ripple effect. It could be positive, it could be negative. And these are the types, if we're not seated at the table, these are the types of life-changing decisions we as a people could miss out on, or we as a people could get access to. So I know I said a lot in that last section, but I want to throw it to my panel here. What do you guys think of that last section?
I'm going to say intent is always going to be the critical piece. I say this in every decision making. Tech only allows us to do what we come up with. That's all that it is. It's just simply a tool. So the intent to disenfranchise individuals will always exist, and they're always looking at this point the removal of physical mailboxes. We're at that level. So it's like, I don't even know how far we can go any further down, but you know, we're real close to rock bottom at this point. So we do have to have, I think this is where we arm us, our community and ourselves with the information of the why and the what. Now we do need to question, and this is the best time to participate because things are changing, and you have to say, okay, that doesn't work for me. I don't like that, because now you have the ability to have that conversation where before, like I said, you never want to be relegated to, you never want to say, okay, this is what's going to happen to you and just suck it up or not. We're at that point. And before we get there, we definitely need to have conversations, make ourselves known. And I think at that point, even if we, again, we're not going to ever stop the threat, but we can mitigate the threat. And that's really, we have to, at this point, play a lot of defense. We were not really going to play offense for a while. And that comes into, you know, the economic prowess that we need to have. But defense still wins games.
Agree. You know, one thing I'll say, and we just saw just with the article with Mr. Epstein, is most of the time you're probably going to know more about blockchain applications than your congressperson or than the people in your state legislature. So don't hesitate to educate them, you know, write letters, speak to them, talk to them, and help them understand, just like Felicia said, those concerns so that they can then be on the lookout for it. Because most of the time, sometimes I think that we kind of fall into a default position of thinking that, oh no, they're already there. Of course they know, they're reading reports. Yeah, don't think that's happening. That's not happening that way. So yeah, sometimes it's us, you know, too, as advocates that do take the point to step forward and to help people understand what they should know.
I thought tonight's conversation was worthwhile. I think it's one of those things where it could change the course of our great-grandchildren's lives significantly based on how this is put together, how it's executed, how it's communicated within the community. You know, we should have a 100% increase in voter participation in the Black community once mobile voting comes up. And the only reason we're not is maybe because either people don't know about it, they don't trust it, they don't think their vote counts, you know, or I don't know, maybe they feel like they don't have anything to vote for. But I think that these things are important, you know, and there's going to be a lot of money made. Trust me, there's going to be a lot of money made. The Democrats and the Republicans right now are having their conferences and conventions, and you know, no matter who wins or loses, there's a lot of money made during election seasons, and there's always an election as well. So we're talking presidential right now, but don't get it twisted. Every year there are mayors, there are city council members, school boards, some of the most vicious, you know, vicious candidates out there running for the school board and the local treasurer of your county and stuff like, and that a lot of times has more impact on you than President of the United States, you know?
Absolutely.
So I think this is an important conversation to have if we're talking about getting our fair share of the economic pie. So, well, I hope everyone had a great time tonight with the discussion, that you learned something, that at least it just got you thinking about this important topic and what's going to be happening with voting and how blockchain is going to be infused in it. And just in case you thought the post office was kidding, I got one more thing to show you here, and it is a blog on USPS delivers, and I did check, this is a real post office website. Is blockchain right for your supply chain? And they literally have Q&A in here convincing people that blockchain is right for the post office.
There we go.
So when I saw this, I'm like, oh, interesting. Interesting. So, yeah, we'll see which one wins. If the post office voting system wins, if it's going to be VOATs and the apps, if it's going to be some hybrid, we don't know. We just think we need to be involved in the conversation.
Perhaps
So,
many more choices. Maybe that's the point. Maybe it gives you an alternative to, or alternatives to, what we currently have, which I said is that one-to-one is not working for us as we see. So
yeah,
I would say sometimes options are a good thing.
Sure.
they can be. They can be. So everybody just stay plugged in, stay connected. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And we will see you next week, same time, same place, for another BBC discussion. So have a
Thank
good
you.
evening, everybody.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Good night, everybody.